Tonight, what does $85 billion get you? High anxiety. Wall Street sells off after the federal government steps in to save insurance giant AIG. I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, the candidates and your money. Each claims to be a reformer who can fix the economy, but do their records match their rhetoric? We'll have a reality check. And the inauguration of a new series, Presidential Questions. What one personal flaw do you think might hinder your ability to be president? The candidates' surprising answers.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. Well, if the government bailout of insurance giant AIG was supposed to get the financial markets to settle down, Wall Street wasn't buying it. The sell-off resumed today, and since Monday, the Dow has dropped more than 800 points, or about 7%. And it's not clear the crisis is over. Today, the struggling savings and loan Washington Mutual reportedly put itself up for sale. Americans, meanwhile, are taking this very seriously. In a CBS News New York Times poll out tonight, 78% of Americans believe the economy is in bad shape. Now, 1 year ago, fewer than half of those polled felt that way. And as Anthony Mason reports, it may take a while for the markets to digest the government rescue of AIG.
Another anxiety attack on Wall Street. Even after the AIG bailout, the Dow tumbled another 450 points.
They're like banging on a big gong. You know, it reverberates for a while, and we're dealing with that reverberation right now. And we're getting these waves of very uncomfortable feelings in the pits of our stomach.
Among the worst hit, the two largest surviving independent investment banks, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, plummeted 18 and 26%.
There's a fear that they can put pressure on those folks. They can do it to anybody.
The Fed had hoped saving AIG would calm the markets, agreeing to lend the insurance giant $85 billion at a steep interest rate, now more than 11%. In return, the government gets a nearly 80% stake in AIG. Company management is replaced. The government will have veto power over major decisions and the right to inspect AIG's books at any time. The rescue package was worked out in an emergency meeting at the Federal Reserve in New York yesterday, as the clock was ticking towards AIG's bankruptcy. After private banks said they couldn't come up with the cash, the Fed agreed to consider a loan. At 3:30, Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke went to the White House and informed the president of the possible deal. At 5 p.m., the Fed laid out its terms to AIG and gave them an 8 o'clock deadline to accept. At 6:30, Treasury Secretary Paulson briefed congressional leaders. At 8 p.m., AIG agreed to the terms. Within an hour, the deal was being signed that averted a crisis in financial markets.
It would have been catastrophic, in the words of some officials. There would have been dominoes falling because of AIG's failure.
Because the trillion-dollar company is at the heart of the financial system, ensuring much of the money that moves between banks and investors.
They insured a lot of the mortgages and mortgage-related securities that are now defaulting, and as a result, it undermined their own financial health.
AIG has 2 years to sell off assets to pay off the government loan. So is this the end of government bailouts? The White House wouldn't say so.
They're taking this on a case-by-case basis, and we will have to continue to do so.
Banks, meanwhile, are hoarding cash, reluctant even to lend to each other. That's driving up interest rates and could soon affect your monthly payments if you have an adjustable rate mortgage. Katie?
And Anthony, we're hearing a couple of other financial institutions are looking to merge or be sold. Is that right?
That's right. As you mentioned earlier, there are reports that Washington Mutual has actually put itself up for auction. Reports that Wachovia has approached Morgan Stanley. Basically, after what happened to Lehman Brothers, anybody who feels vulnerable even to rumor has got to protect itself, and that's what's going on.
All right, Anthony Mason. Anthony, thank you as always. Now turning to presidential politics, with both candidates talking about the economy, our new poll of Main Street finds Barack Obama back on top. Here's tonight's CBS News Campaign 08 Notebook. The new CBS News New York Times poll puts Barack Obama 5 points ahead of John McCain among registered voters. Last week, our poll had Senator McCain up by 2 points. Meanwhile, 42% of voters say Sarah Palin is prepared to be vice president. That's down 5 points since last week. 74% of voters say Joe Biden is prepared to be VP, up 4. Today, both presidential candidates stumped in battleground states. McCain was in Michigan, where he blamed a casino culture for the latest turmoil on Wall Street. In Nevada, Obama called his Republican rivals' calls for more regulation an 11th hour conversion.
This is somebody who's been in Congress for 26 years, who put 7 of the most powerful Washington lobbyists in charge of his campaign. And now he tells us that he's the one who's going to take on the Old Boys Network. The Old Boys Network. In the McCain campaign, that's called a staff meeting.
So each candidate claims he's the one who can solve the financial crisis, but do their past records match their current stump speeches? Time for a reality check and Wyatt Andrews.
As news of the AIG bailout rocked Wall Street, both candidates were ready with new ads, both looking straight into the camera and both promising serious reform.
I'll reform Wall Street and fix Washington.
End the anything goes culture on Wall Street with real regulation.
McCain, in his latest stump speech, also promises he will stop the Wall Street abuses before they begin.
And we're going to enact and enforce reforms that make sure that these outrageous, and they are outrageous, never happen in the first place.
Here are the facts. McCain admitted as the mortgage crisis was happening that he never saw it coming.
I'd like to tell you I did anticipate it, but I have to give you straight talk, I did not.
McCain also said he did not know how to help homeowners without also bailing out speculators.
But I can't come down yet and give you a specific solution because I don't claim to be smart enough.
Obama, meanwhile, claims that he saw the meltdown from the start and introduced a law to stop the shaky mortgages.
I introduced legislation to stop mortgage transactions that promoted fraud, risk, or abuse.
This claim is true. In fact, Obama introduced this 2006 bill to curb abusive lending. But this was 1 year into Obama's Senate career, and the bill went nowhere. As for Obama's claim that McCain was nowhere, this claim is false. The fact is, in March of 2005, McCain co-sponsored a bill to impose new oversight on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, but this bill died. Obama also charges that one of the godfathers of banking deregulation, Phil Gramm, is still one of McCain's top advisors and a banking lobbyist.
You remember Phil Gramm? He's the guy who said that we were just going through a mental recession and who called the United States of America a nation of whiners.
Phil Gramm, in fact, was a lobbyist for the investment bank UBS through April of this year. He formally left the McCain campaign in July. Senator McCain, meanwhile, has shifted gears on using taxpayer funds to prop up AIG. Yesterday, he was against all federal help. Today, he said the government was forced to act and should protect people holding AIG insurance policies and retirement accounts. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, Washington.
In other news, the death toll from Hurricane Ike continued to rise today. At least 50 people in 11 states are known dead. And among those who did survive, there's growing desperation and frustration over the help that has not come their way. Mark Strassman has more tonight from the Texas coast.
Dr. James McCarthy leads an emergency room running on empty.
Were you stomach hurting yesterday?
Patients keep coming. Ike's new victims hurt in the cleanup. But also here, patients from 14 other regional hospitals, all closed, no power.
So we're at 300% capacity. We've got extra nurses, extra doctors, but the staff's doing a great job, but they're getting a little bit fried too.
From Texas to Ohio, Ike still leaves almost 3 million people in 7 states without power, just under 2 million in Texas alone, and half of them may still be without it a week from now. Gas is liquid gold. Only 40% of stations around Houston are open.
They have a 20-gallon limit on external fuel.
Lines for food, ice, and water stretched hundreds deep. Some waited hours.
We don't have any ice or water or nothing. And we want at least to get bottled waters to take a bath or something.
Search teams have rescued more than 3,500 people, now trying to survive Ike's aftermath. Not one Galveston resident has power or water. It's an island of mud and mold, debris and disease.
They don't have anything to come back to, other than a lot of hard work.
Early estimates tonight, 2 million Texas homes were damaged or destroyed, but all of Houston's drinking water is safe again, and today the city's downtown was no longer a ghost town.
Katie?
Mark Strassman in Houston tonight. Thank you, Mark. There is much more CBS News ahead. Coming up next, our special series of presidential questions. John McCain and Barack Obama answer the same question tonight about 9/11 and their biggest flaw. In just 48 days, Americans decide whether Barack Obama or John McCain become the 44th president of the United States. Tonight, we're beginning a new series, Presidential Questions, which goes well beyond the usual sound bites. Some questions will be about policy, others will be more personal. All will give you a better sense of who these men are and what has shaped them. We begin tonight with a question on the minds of almost every American. Why do you think there has not been another terrorist attack on U.S. soil since 9/11? And as president, how would you prevent that from happening again?
Katie, I think we ought to give credit to the administration, to the president, and to the dedicated people who have worked from the level of our intelligence agencies around the world to the local policemen, firemen, first responders who have done such a magnificent job. I also, in a little straight talk, think there's always an element of luck involved. I thank God every day, and so do all of us Americans. I think that we ought to have a closer relationship probably between Republican and Democrat on this. When we let our intelligence capability to monitor communications amongst would-be terrorists or terrorists, and we were gridlocked for so long, is an indication that perhaps we've lost the unity that characterized America after 9/11. So I would work more closely with the leaders of Congress. I know them well, but I also think that we should unleash more of America's technology.
When you say technology, more technology,
Yeah,
what exactly do you mean?
There's satellites, there's the kinds of technologies that are being developed in our national labs as other places. And by the way, part of that technology I left out, and that's human intelligence. Our technological capabilities are pretty good. They're going to get better, and we've got to work on getting them better. But we still haven't got the kind of human intelligence that can tell us the intentions of the enemy.
Well, I think that the initial invasion into Afghanistan disrupted al-Qaeda, and that was the right thing to do. I mean, we had to knock out those safe havens, and that, I think, weakened them. We did some work in strengthening our homeland security apparatus here. Obviously, the average person knows that whenever they go to the airport, because they are going through taking off their shoes and all that. The problem is when we got distracted by Iraq, we gave al-Qaeda time to reconstitute itself. And we now know, based on all the intelligence available to us, that they in fact have set up safe havens back in Afghanistan, the hills between Afghanistan and Pakistan. They are now carrying out very aggressive actions against U.S. troops in Afghanistan, and they are training to attack the United States once again. So now my hope, obviously, is that we continue to prevent them from being able to move at all out of those safe havens. But our intelligence indicates that the danger, the likelihood of a potential attack is significantly higher now, and that has been an enormous mistake that I intend to correct when I'm President of the United States.
What one personal flaw do you think might hinder your ability to be president?
I don't think there's a flaw that would hinder my ability to function as president. I think that all of us have things we need to improve. I've said during the primary that my management of paper can sometimes be a problem.
You can come up with something better than that, can't you?
Well, I just use as an example of something that I'm constantly trying to work on. What is often a strength can be a weakness. So, for me, there are times where I want to think through all our options. And at some point, you've got to make sure that we're making a decision. So far, at least, I've proven to be pretty good about knowing when that time is. I think as president, with all the information that's coming at you constantly, you're never going to have 100% information. And you've just got to make the call quickly and surely. And, I think that that's a capacity that I've shown myself to have.
I'm not an objective observer. I would think that probably, I think that would have to be to make sure that I don't make any decisions that are not fully informed by every source of information that's credible I can possibly get. When I see and read history, I see sometimes that presidents make judgments that they only consulted a small circle of people, and sometimes those were only those who agreed with that president. I've got to make sure that I reach out to Democrats, to Republicans, to people who have opposing views, because when we're making decisions about the future of the country, you cannot discount practically any viewpoint. So what happens to presidents in history is they get in bubbles and they don't get all the information they need to make the best judgments. I've got to guard against that.
Now, tomorrow in our special series, Where They Stand, we'll take a closer look at the candidates' positions on national security, specifically where they stand on dealing with the threat of Islamic extremism. And on Friday, we're going to go on the road for a behind-the-scenes look at vice presidential candidate Joe Biden's campaign. And I'll be back with more news in a moment. The U.S. Embassy in Yemen was attacked by terrorists today. At least one car bomb exploded outside the gates, and security officials were ambushed by snipers. 16 people were killed, including 6 attackers, but the compound wasn't breached and no Americans were hurt. A State Department official says it could be the work of al-Qaeda. Meanwhile, in Afghanistan today, Defense Secretary Robert Gates apologized for civilian deaths caused by U.S. airstrikes, and he promised the U.S. would be more careful when targeting terrorists. Afghan authorities, including President Hamid Karzai, charged that an August raid left as many as 90 civilians, including women and children, dead. And there's another consumer product horror story from China. More than 6,000 Chinese infants are sick, and at least 3 have died from powdered baby formula tainted with a toxic chemical used in plastics. In this country, the FDA says no Chinese companies are licensed to sell that baby formula here. Up next, the evolution of video games. The latest lets you create your own universe. Finally tonight, having trouble prying your kids away from video games? You're not alone. They're bigger than ever, with more than $1 billion in sales just last month. The latest incarnation, called Spore, could make your child feel like a real master of the universe. Daniel Seberg checks it out in our series, The Games Our Children Play.
Parents, take heart. Perhaps the most ambitious computer game ever conceived is considered good for boys and girls.
Use your imagination to explore all the different things that might happen, unfold in that universe. Really, it's, the subject of Spore really is life.
Spore is the latest creation from Will Wright, who for 20 years has made games that don't offer the typical shoot-'em-up fare. Rather, his games let players, in a sense, play God.
I found it was just kind of more satisfying to be creating, these little worlds than just blowing them up.
With Spore, there's no game over.
I think I'm going to swap out his hands with something with claws.
Instead, the goal is to create your own species, personalizing your creature from skin color to arm length, then evolve from a tide pool to a functioning civilization to explorers in space. Dubbed a universe in a box, it took about 90 people more than 5 years and $50 million to create.
It's a game so anticipated, even before it was released, eager gamers have already made more than 3 million creatures online. No two alike. And posted about 100,000 videos of them on YouTube.
When the players create stuff in the game, they get much more emotionally connected to it.
Will Wright has developed almost a cult following.
Yeah, we just got games.
With his family-friendly games, including a substantial number of young women.
Women are more interested in creating something than destroying it.
Ultimately, Spore allows anyone to control their own universe. And who couldn't use a little more of that? Daniel Seberg, CBS News, Emeryville, California.
And tomorrow, do you have fantasies about playing in Aerosmith or Metallica? We'll tell you about the game that puts you in a rock band. Meanwhile, that's the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Katie Couric. Thank you for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.